Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. In case you're new here, my name's Jennifer, and today we're going to be talking again about garden planning. Now, garden planning to me is so exciting because there's so much potential and so much possibility just thinking about what you're going to do in the coming year. So honestly, planting the garden is one of my favorite times of year, and that's really what I look forward to after Christmas. You know, we spend all that energy getting ready for Christmas, which is great. I love Christmas too. But when Christmas is over, sometimes it seems like there's almost a little bit of a letdown. You know, now you're settling into that long, cold winter ahead. And garden planning comes along at the perfect time because it just gives me a way to look forward to spring. And it's something that has to be done, so you know, you don't have to feel guilty about it. It's something I'm doing that's enjoyable, but it's something also that has to be done. So this is the time of year to really start thinking about garden planning. And one of the big decisions you're going to have to make with your garden is to decide whether you're planning to start your plants from seed or whether you're planning to buy transplants or whether you're planning to do a little bit of both. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you're going to want to consider when you're making that decision. I'm going to talk about what I do and why I do that, and I guess just the advantages and disadvantages of each method. Now, when it comes to starting seeds, I'm going to give you guys a little spoiler alert. I love starting seeds. You can see I've got my seed collection right here. I love seeds. So that is for the most part what I do, but I do get some transplants as well, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first I'm going to talk about some of the things to consider if you want to start from seed. Now, the biggest, or one of the biggest, probably most obvious advantages of starting from seed is that you have the potential to save a lot of money doing it that way. So depending on your area of the country and how much plant nurseries charge in your area, you know, roughly you'll spend about as much on a packet of seeds as you will on one started plant. Sometimes it's cheaper to get the seeds than it is to get the single started plant. But in that packet of seeds, depending on the type of seeds you're getting, you may have enough seeds to plant at least 10, 20, 30, even more of that type of plant. And so if you're planning to grow a lot of plants of the same variety, you know, starting from seed can save you so much money. So for example, if you want to grow, say, 10 Roma tomatoes, you go down to the nursery, you might spend $3, $2, $3 each on a started Roma tomato plant, and you'll spend $2 or $3 on a whole packet of Roma tomato seeds that could give you maybe 20 seeds. So it has the potential to save you a lot of money. Now, obviously, there are other costs associated with starting seeds. You're going to have some kind of container to start them in. What I do, for the most part, honestly, is I reuse a lot of pots that I have bought plants in the past. I also have invested in some seed starting equipment, but that isn't really a necessity. I mean, you can start plants in little plastic cups. I've done that before. I've had a lot of my friends and family give me little pots that they've gotten plants in from the nursery, and I kind of collect them that way. And if you go out and buy seed starting equipment, most of that will be reusable. Now, you are going to have to buy soil. That's one thing to keep in mind. So that is going to up your cost a little bit more. You're also going to provide some sort of light for them. Now, depending on your lighting situation, you may be able to grow them in a sunny window if you have a really sunny window that gets a lot of light. I use grow lights for my plants, but I don't use the expensive. So when I say grow lights, I use lights for my plants. I honestly just use the cheap shop lights that I got, I think, from Home Depot. I actually bought them used from somebody who had gotten them from a place like Home Depot. And you just put regular fluorescent bulbs in them. That may not be the most efficient way to grow plants, but it's a very affordable way to start seedlings. So that's honestly what I do. So once you have your setup in place, you can actually save a lot of money starting seeds rather than buying transplants. Now, another advantage, which to me, this is probably the biggest advantage to starting from seed, is having so much more to choose from. Now, if you go down to your local nursery, they'll probably have a handful of tomato varieties, a handful of pepper varieties. But if you look at a seed company, you're going to find dozens, potentially even hundreds of varieties of tomatoes and peppers and all these different types of plants. And there's just so much more variety to choose from. So that is one of the primary reasons that I start seeds, aside from the fact that I just enjoy it. Now, one other thing I did forget to mention, actually, when I was talking about saving money, is that, so let's go back to that Roma tomato packet that we talked about. Say you get 20 seeds in that packet, and you want to grow 5 Roma tomato plants. So you could use 5 seeds. You may use 10 seeds if you want to put 2 seeds in each pot and make sure that you get one germinating. But you're still going to have, say in that example, 10 seeds left at the end of the year. Those seeds will still be good as long as you store them properly. They'll still be good next year, and you could use it again, and you don't have to spend that money again on a second packet of seeds. So in most cases, seeds will last for a couple years or even longer. Now, I've grown tomatoes from seeds that I've had lying around for 5 years before, and the plants did completely fine. Now, you will get a little bit of a lower germination rate as your seeds age, but as long as you store them properly, you should still be able to get some great germination out of seeds that are several years old. So another advantage to starting your own seeds is that you can control the growing conditions start to finish. So I like just knowing how the plants were grown. I like knowing the growing conditions. I like knowing what kind of fertilizer they've had. I like knowing what kind of pest control treatments they've had, anything like that. I know exactly what those plants have had, and I can control. If you want to grow your plants organically, for example, you may have a more challenging time finding an organic nursery. But if you grow those plants yourself, you can give them a great organic head start in your house, starting the seeds yourself. Now, another advantage, to me this is an advantage, this is kind of a personal preference kind of thing. I like starting seeds because I just enjoy it. It lets me kind of play in the dirt a little bit sooner. You know, I'll start my seeds in, depending on what I'm starting, I'll start my seeds in February, March, April. Starting seeds, especially in February and March, it's still really cold in my area. The ground is still frozen in February. A lot of times there's still snow outside. I can't go out and do anything in my garden, but I can start plants in my house, and that just makes me feel closer to the garden, and it just helps me to kind of get that little gardening fix during the off season. So for me, that's an advantage. I realize that may not be an advantage for everybody, but I really like it. And I find kind of going along with that, it just gives you that sense of accomplishment when you are able to take a seed and grow it from start to finish until you actually harvest that vegetable. It just gives you a real sense of accomplishment, and I find for me, it kind of gives me just the confidence of knowing how to grow food. I just really like that satisfaction and that feeling. Now, all that being said, those are a lot of great reasons to grow seeds, but there are some reasons why you may want to consider transplants as well. So the first advantage to purchasing transplants rather than starting seeds yourself is that you're not going to need any equipment. So for the most part, you're going to go out, once your garden is all prepared, you're going to go to the local nursery, you're going to find the plants you want, and then you're just going to put them in the garden. So you don't need to worry about grow lights, you don't need to worry about soil or pots or anything like that. You don't need to worry about keeping your plants alive inside, protecting them from disease or pests, or you don't have to worry about hardening them off. Those are all things that the nursery will have done for you. And so especially for somebody who's first getting started and it feels a little bit intimidating to start seeds, all of those things can kind of make buying transplants a little bit of an easier transition into gardening. So that may be something you want to consider, especially if you have limited space inside and you don't really have a great setup for starting seeds. Now, kind of going along with it, if you buy started transplants, it's less of a time commitment. If you have a really busy schedule and you just don't have the time to start your seeds, you don't have the time to keep an eye on your seeds or anything like that, starting transplants could be a great option for you. Because as I said, all of that work will already be done. You'll be purchasing most likely a healthy plant. You won't have to worry about babying it through the seedling stage. Now, another advantage of transplants is that you don't have to plan ahead as much. That is one, so it's not really a disadvantage, but when it comes to starting seeds, you do have to plan ahead. That's going to kind of, how much planning ahead you have to do depends on what area you're growing in. Now, in my area, we have a fairly short growing season, so I'm not going to, for example, take a tomato seed and start that tomato seed in May and expect to get a whole summer worth of tomatoes from that plant. So if you are in an area with a short growing season especially, you're going to have to plan ahead when it comes to starting seeds because a lot of those seeds are supposed to be started 6 to 8 weeks before they're actually ready to go in the ground. So if that feels intimidating to you and you don't feel ready to plan ahead that way yet, buying transplants could be a great option for you. Now, it's also a great option if, say, for example, the seed starting window has passed in your area. It's really too late to grow a certain plant in your area from seed, but you really want to grow it. You may be able to find a started transplant at a nursery, and they've already done all that preliminary work for you. So that gives you kind of a head start. If you're buying a tomato plant, for example, at a nursery, it's 6 to 8 weeks old. That gives you that 6 to 8 week head start. And you don't have to do as much advanced planning. So that can be an advantage as well. So I start the good majority of plants that I grow from seed myself for all the reasons that I mentioned. It saves me money, I enjoy it, I get to choose the varieties. So for those reasons, I really like to start seeds. But I usually end up most years buying a couple transplants as well. So for example, last year, I started cauliflower seedlings and something happened to them. I'm not even sure what it was. My cauliflower seedlings were really weak and did not do well. So I really wanted to grow cauliflower. At that point, it was really too late to start more cauliflower seeds and get a good harvest before it got too hot. So I went to a local nursery. I bought a couple cauliflower seedlings and I was able to grow cauliflower. So just having that nursery available is a great backup plan in case something doesn't go well with your seeds. Another reason I usually get some transplants is that I a lot of times will decide last minute I want to add something into my growing lineup, but it's too late to start seeds for it. So I can kind of go out and find that plant. And a third reason why I grow transplants is impulse buy. Now, I always start a lot of lettuce plants, and they're beautiful. But when I go to the nursery in the spring, they have more lettuce plants, and they're beautiful, and they have types that I don't have, and some of their plants might be bigger than mine. So it is very tempting to buy additional plants from the nursery. So for those 3 reasons, I usually end up getting a few from the nursery, although I start the majority from seed. Now, another thing you want to be aware of when you're deciding whether or not to start your own seeds is a category of plants called direct sow. These are plants that it really makes sense to start yourself, and it's not any more work. It's, in fact, I would say it's probably less work than buying a transplant at the nursery, and those are direct sow plants. Now, there are a lot of plants that you plant just by sticking a seed in the ground outside. And you don't need to start them ahead inside. You don't need to baby them. You don't need to worry about any of that. You just stick a seed in the ground outside, you water it, and it grows. It's, I would say, less work than transplanting a transplant. Now, many of those types of seeds, or many of those types of plants, you will still find available for purchase at a local nursery. I'm not saying don't buy them, but I'm saying that in these cases, it is just as easy to just stick a seed in the ground yourself. You'll get a lot more plants for a lot less money, and often a plant that's direct sown ends up being healthier than a transplanted plant. So some examples of plants that fall into that category are peas. So for example, snap peas, I don't start them inside. I just go out to my garden in March, usually March, depends on the weather conditions for the year. I just plop them in the ground along my fence so that they have something to climb. They just grow, and that's it. So I don't have to do any transplanting. I don't have to do any babying them inside. Peas are a great beginner plant because they require almost no work. Another plant like that is beans. So beans, I don't start inside ahead of time. Both my pole beans and my bush beans, I just direct sow the beans outside. They grow, and that's it. So I don't have to spend any time babying them. I don't have to buy transplants and transplant the plants into the garden. I just stick the seeds in the ground, and they grow. Other examples of plants like that are lettuce. Now, I do usually start some lettuce inside to get a head start, but that is just because I want to. You do not have to do that. You can just stick seeds directly in the ground, and lettuce will grow outside completely fine. Now, another plant is carrots. Carrots actually, for the most part, do better if you direct sow them as opposed to transplanting them, because you're harvesting the carrot for the root, and the root could get damaged or bent, and all kinds of things could happen to it when you're transplanting it. A lot of times, transplanted carrots end up looking kind of weird. They don't grow quite right. So you'll usually have a better result direct sowing carrots anyway. So some other plants you can direct sow include cucumbers. Now, I do usually start some of my cucumbers inside, but I also direct sow some cucumbers directly in my garden. So again, if you see that beautiful cucumber plant at the nursery and you want to purchase it, go for it. There's nothing wrong with buying a started transplant, but a lot of times those plants will do just as well or even better if you just stick a seed in the ground. So cucumbers, summer squash is another great example. My zucchini plants, I have started them inside in the past, but I find that they usually do better when I just stick a seed outside in the ground. So a lot of flowers and herbs will also fall into that category as well. Now, a lot of times I do start flowers inside because by starting them inside, you're going to get earlier blooms, but you don't have to do that. You're going to want to look up the individual flower, but in a lot of cases, you can just stick the seeds outside in the ground and they'll grow perfectly fine out there as well. One other thing to keep in mind is that there's nothing wrong with trying to grow your plants from seed, and if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. At that point, you can just go get transplants from the nursery. So if you try growing plants from seed and it doesn't do well, then you gain some knowledge and some experience, and you'll be a little bit more prepared for coming years to try again. But for that year, just go ahead and buy transplants. There's nothing wrong with that. So I hope that this kind of real quick, brief overview helped make your decision a little bit easier. And I hope that you guys are really enjoying the garden planning season. I'll be doing a lot more garden planning videos as I really get into planning my garden for the 2023 season. I will also take you guys along with me as I start seeds and put these plants out in the garden, just all the different steps to having a great and successful garden. So I hope you guys are inspired to start your own gardens this year. I hope you guys are having a great day. I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye guys. I'll see you next time.